बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। हेलो दोस्तों, कैसे हो आप? मैं हूं मोहम्मद आजम रियाज और आप देख रहे हैं जीएन न्यूज उर्दू। आज तारीख है The 20th of May 2022. Russia-Ukraine war. Zelensky says Donbass is completely destroyed. Russia has turned Donbass into hell, says Zelensky. The U.S. Senate has approved $40 billion in aid to Ukraine. The U.S. Senate has approved a $40 billion aid package for Ukraine. Supply crisis. U.S. accuses Russia of arming food and blocking global supplies. Further, Russian oil exports to the east have squeezed Iranian crude oil sales to Chi. Iran's oil exports to China have declined since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, as Beijing has backed concessions on Russian oil. Russia says sanctions on Ukraine's ports will need to be reviewed. Ukraine, one of the world's largest grain producers, exported most of its goods through its ports. What could happen to Ukraine's Azovstal POWs? The focus is now on what can be done with Mariupol POWs and what rights they have as Russian prisoners. Around the world news. Australian election. Why is the Australian Parliament so white? Australia is one of the world's most multicultural nations, but it's a different story in domestic politics, with 96% of federal legislators being white. Australian elections. Voters will vote in the battle of bulldozer and builder. Telephone voting rules have been changed to allow Australians with codes to vote in federal elections. NATO. Joe Biden supports Sweden. Finland bid for membership. G7. Germany pledges €1 billion grants for Ukraine. The cash flow is intended to finance the Ukrainian government, as Russia's war has wiped out tax revenues. Canada will ban China's Huawei and ZTE from its 5G networks. Finland opposes hosting nuclear weapons and NATO military bases. PM Sanna Marin says Helsinki does not want its membership bid to increase military footprints.
Middle East news. The King of Jordan has imprisoned his half-brother Prince Hamza. King Abdullah II has said that Prince Hamza will not be given a place to anger the nation if the royal rift widens. Abu Hamza's stateless son wants a terror trial in Britain's OE. O'Brien via BBC News. Sufyan Kamal, who lost his British citizenship after fighting in Syria, says he has been treated unfairly. Fighting has intensified in the Libyan capital, Tripoli. Members of an eastern faction arrived overnight in an attempt to claim power. They then left the city after hours of fighting. The results of Lebanon's election have sparked a new power struggle. Anna Foster says a long standoff could ensue after Hezbollah allies lose seats to their rivals. The U.S. military has found no fault in the Syrian attack. Dozens of people, including women and children, were killed in an attack on Anas position in 2019. The Hezbollah bloc has lost a majority in Lebanon's parliament. The Iranian-backed group suffered a setback in the first election after widespread anti-government protests. The United States has banned a Lebanese businessman for alleged links to Hezbollah. The U.S. Treasury Department has imposed sanctions on an alleged financial facilitator for the Lebanese group Hezbollah. 25 ethnic Pamirs were killed by security forces during protests in Tajikistan. Israel will not criminalize the murder of journalist Shirin Abu Akleh. Israeli lawmaker resigns harassing the Palestinians, putting the government in a parliamentary minority. An Arab member resigned in anger, leaving the government as a weak minority for the first time. Freudian slip. Bush condemns invasion of Iraq, not Ukraine. Former U.S. President George W. Bush said in a speech on Russia's war against Ukraine that the 2003 invasion of Iraq was completely unjust, brutal. Asian news. Sri Lanka focuses on security during Biden's visit to South Korea. Japan. U.S. President Joe Biden aims to boost ties with East Asian allies to counter China and North Korea. 5 Asian military hotspots and how they play a role in Biden's visit. North Korea shuts down foreign aid over COVID disaster without access to effective antiviral drugs. North Korea suffers from the spread of COVID in unvaccinated populations. Pyongyang has not responded to offers of assistance and inquiries from the United States, South Korea, the WHO and UNICEF. Sri Lanka slips into default. Central bank chief agrees to stay for the first time in history. Sri Lanka did not repay the loan. The island nation fell into default for the first time in its history as the government struggled to contain the economic crisis. The Taliban ordered female Afghan TV presenters to cover their faces in order to broadcast. Former India cricketer jailed for road rage. Navjot Singh Sadhu, a cricketer turned politician, has been jailed for 1 year for running after an elderly man. India accuses Kashmiri rebel leader Yasin Malik of terrorism bombs and weapons used in Afghanistan by militants, and US forces are entering Indian-administered Kashmir, raising fears that they could intensify Islamist insurgency in the region. How to stay safe in the heat wave. Heat waves are common in India and Pakistan, but this year is hotter than ever. Here's how to stay safe.
Pakistani news. Bad news for power consumers. Price ₹4.05 is likely to increase further. One for the people who are suffering from inflation, and the bad news came out. Electricity is ₹4.05 more expensive. NEPRA is likely to hold a hearing on May 31. The Central Power Purchasing Agency (CPPA) has filed a petition to increase the price of electricity in the context of April's monthly fuel adjustment. The reference cost for April was fixed at ₹6.60 per unit, NEPRA authority said will decide after the hearing. NAB orders immediate ban on appointments and transfers. According to the NAB statement, the execution of recent postings and transfers has also been stopped immediately. Has been yesterday, the Supreme Court, while hearing ASUO Motu notice regarding government interference in the investigation of investigative agencies, conducted special high-profile cases. Withheld from appointments and transfers in court and NAB cases was Pakistan and China have agreed to repatriate Pakistani students studying in Chinese universities to China, after which arrangements have been made for the gradual return of students. According to details, the Pakistani embassy confirmed the decision of the students to return to China. A statement from the embassy said, "We had lengthy discussions with the Chinese authorities regarding the return of Pakistani students to Chinese universities. The unusual situation caused by the coronavirus has affected the educational activities of students around the world, including Pakistani students enrolled in Chinese universities. The majority of Pakistani students are in Pakistan despite being admitted." The Pakistani embassy said that they had held talks with Chinese officials for the return of students, while Prime Minister Mia Shahbaz Sharif also discussed the return of students to Chinese universities during a recent telephone conversation with his Chinese counterpart Li Keqiang. The embassy said that the C.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe this channel.